Hello, I'm Leonard Maltin. After making westerns for 30 years, I'm sure it was tough for John Wayne to find new and interesting ideas. But having enjoyed success with a boisterous comedic adventure called North to Alaska, the notion of doing something else in a lighthearted vein appealed to him. And the result was a slapstick variation on Shakespeare's The Taming of the Shrew, set in the Old West, with one of his favorite leading ladies, Maureen O'Hara, in the co-starring role. It was called McLintock. Michael Wayne took the producer's reins on this film and surrounded his father with compatible colleagues on both sides of the camera. Andrew McLaughlin had been an assistant director on many of Wayne's movies, including Sands of Iwo Jima, Island in the Sky, The High and the Mighty, and John Ford's The Quiet Man, which co-starred Andrew's father, Victor McLaughlin. He directed his first features for Wayne's Batjack Company, Gun the Man Down and Man in the Vault, and then became a prolific director of television westerns like Gunsmoke, Have Gun Will Travel, and Rawhide. McLintock was his biggest feature film assignment to date, and he didn't let Wayne or anyone else down. Wayne's favorite screenwriter, James Edward Grant, provided the story and screenplay for McLintock, which was short on subtlety but full of crowd-pleasing entertainment. And cinematographer William Clothier, who shot most of Wayne's westerns in the 50s and 60s, was perched behind the camera during production in and around Tucson, Arizona. The star's second-born son, Patrick Wayne, won a co-starring part opposite up-and-coming ingenue Stephanie Powers, while beautiful Yvonne DiCarlo gave Maureen O'Hara a run for her money as a romantic rival. Incidentally, there's another Wayne on camera. John Wayne's daughter, Aissa, plays DiCarlo's little girl. The rest of the cast is filled with familiar faces from Wayne and John Ford movies, from Chill Wills, Michael Pate, and former cowboy star Bob Steele. That goes for the stunt people, too, and fight coordinator Cliff Lyons, who had his hands full when Wayne and O'Hara decided to join the stunt folks in the Great Mud Melee. I think that sense of familiarity extended to the audience as well. They knew the kind of movie they were going to see, and John Wayne was going to give it to them. A big, rowdy, comedic western. Sure enough, McLintock was a smash hit in 1963, when Wayne was riding high as one of the country's top 10 box office stars. The continuing potency of his name and image all these decades later says a great deal about that connection to the movie-going public. Two of John Wayne's female co-stars have vivid memories of making McLintock. His most frequent leading lady, Maureen O'Hara, and then up-and-coming actress, Stephanie Powers.
When I read the script, I was thrilled. I thought, by God, they wrote this for the two of us. Duke sent me the script, and that's it. You're doing it. He wouldn't have used anybody else.
Catherine.
George Washington McLintock.
There isn't another woman that I know of who could have played those scenes. We'd need about an hour to mention all of the wonderful performers that were in the film.
What a privilege it was for me to be involved with this film and with these people. It was more than just a job. It was more than just a movie. It was, at the same time, a realization of a dream. It also was a dream that lasted through time, and we all remained friends, which was the greatest gift that I could ever have received.
Mike produced McLintock, and he was a fine, fine producer. We made McLintock in Nogales and Old Tucson, Arizona.
The hell I was.
He was a naturally macho human being. Macho is a Spanish word meaning very male, very masculine. I think God made him that way.
Oh, how I hate you.
Half the people in the world are women. Why does it have to be you that stirs me?
Really. He couldn't help it.
Sorry.
I had just had serious surgery, and when we were ready for me to slide backwards down in the mud, wardrobe man And the wardrobe lady grabbed me, and they started taking my clothes off. And I said, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And they said, "We can't let you go down that and risk your stomach opening up and all of your innards coming out. So we're going to fix you for it." Somewhere they had found the waterproof leggings a fisherman wears if he goes into a stream and he's going to get wet. They cut the top off of it, and then they pulled the pants and everything up and then tied it around my waist, then put my clothes back on, and they said, "All right, now you can go do the stunt." Duke said to me, "What the hell kept you?" But I couldn't tell him. I told him afterwards, and he was shocked. And he said, "Why didn't you tell me? For God's sake, I wouldn't have made you do all those things." And I said, "Well, no, I'm not going to ask pity from you, ever." I did the stunt and slid backwards, and we had a close-up to do. And we were going to do it the next morning. And we had to be covered in all the mud like we were at the finish of the scene. We stopped in the evening time. And it was bitterly cold. It was one of those freezing cold desert mornings. And they covered us with this mud, this bentonite. And they put a blanket around Duke and a blanket around me. And oh, God almighty, that was awful, because this bentonite just went through the blanket and into our skin, and it was unbelievably uncomfortable and miserable and awful, and that cold wind hitting you and going through the middle and out your back. And I was standing there beside Duke, we're both shivering, and I said, "Good God, Duke," I said, "this is awful. It's like bird shit." And he said, "What do you mean? Snot." And oh God, that made it worse. Can you imagine being covered in that?
They had worked so frequently and so well together that they had their own sort of language. He would say, "Oh, you'll zig and I'll zag. Okay, I'll do that." You know, they knew immediately what the other one was going to do, how that was going to work, and what would happen. And they were both very physical. They all had to fall into a mud pit, and there was a lot of fighting and all. And just watching them, they knew exactly how to do it. They had worked things out so well, and it was so natural to them. They truly had a sensational rapport. I like to think that in my life, I was able to replicate that kind of rapport with Robert Wagner. And that's what I can relate it to. That's the first time I ever saw it.
Duke was wonderful to work for. In McLintock, you know, when my petticoat is pulled off and I continue running in those bloomers, and I thought, God, I'm going to ask Duke, can we shorten the legs a bit? Because I've got good legs. Why can't I show them? And so I asked Duke, could we shorten the legs in the bloomers? And he said, "No way. We make family movies." And so I had to play the whole scene in those long drawers.
But the real reason, Becky, is because I love you. And I want you and some young man to have what I had.
The day that I was most nervous was the day when John Wayne and I, the Duke, and I were going to have our father-daughter scene. He liked me because I could ride. I was a bit of a tomboy, so he liked that in me, and kind of was a great cheerleader and supporter, and I like to think that there was affection between us. The day that the scene arrived, we had to shoot in a copse of trees, and I was to ride out and find him there. And it was a coming-of-age scene, you know. It was about the things unspoken for so long. Once the cameras were up and in place and we were about to shoot it, we rehearsed again, they relit, and just as I was taking my position to ride into the shot, I see himself coming over to me. And I thought, oh my God, this is the moment he's going to tell me something. He's going to impart some wonderful wisdom to me about acting, or about, you know, how we can do this better, or what have you. And he rolled over as he would roll, you know. He rolled over and he rolled up to me and he took a long look at me and he said, "Just remember, kid, it's all in the eyes." And he turned around and rolled away. So that was my John Wayne acting class. It's all in the eyes. And he was right. Of course he was right.
Michael Wayne, Duke's son, said Maureen was the only one who could stand up to my father, stand toe-to-toe with him, and match him in everything. And to have Duke's kids feel that way was kind of nice.
Oh, Becky. Mama! Oh, darling. I wasn't sure you'd be here. Oh, I've been here a few days. Oh, Becky, I bought you 3 of the most beautiful dresses.
Maureen is such a generous, wonderful actress to work with. And her natural warmth just makes you feel that everything is right. I mean, all of these people never put a foot wrong. They were the people that you expected them to be. They were those bigger-than-life characters, and they seemed to radiate that. So it gave one a tremendous amount of confidence because you were in their shadow. You could hardly be bad. I mean, they were such generous actors. Maureen had a most interesting habit. She had studied with a man who had perfected a kind of technique to allow actors to be able to strengthen their eyes. It was called the Bates method. And when you, in those days, the speed of film was a bit slower. So the light had to be pumped in with great Klieg lights, you know, enormously strong lights to compensate for the power of the sun. And she would stand in front of the sun and kind of keep her eyes open, and she would do this continually. And I'll be darned, it worked. She would then open her eyes. They would stay bright and clear. They wouldn't, mine would always fill with tears, and I wind up at the end of the scene with my mascara running. She was perfect. Today, sometimes cameramen light the set and kind of if you're in the light, it's great, but they don't necessarily pinpoint you as much as they used to. There were specific lights that were your lights, and specific things you would walk into, which was your light. That's your light. Always know how to find your light. And she was very, very good at knowing exactly where her lights were. Watching her was a real lesson.
In the scene, it's Pat that hands him the shovel to hit me with. And he really whacked me because you don't cheat. You couldn't cheat at that moment. And I got a black and blue rear end, and I had it for weeks. But if it had taken a few inches off, I might have said, well, at least it slimmed me down a bit. But it didn't.
It was magic. The whole, from start to finish, it was the most magical experience. Every day was an adventure. Every day was a treat. Every day was something special and beyond reality, bigger than life. As you would imagine John Wayne to be, and as you would imagine his aura, you know, he created a big wave and we were all in the wake, you know. So it was a very big wave that he created.
In Arkansas, I knew some of the top theater men, and they said that they kept the movie going for weeks and weeks and weeks because they couldn't provide enough seats for the public who wanted to see it, that they loved McLintock.
What I remember most of all is the loyalty that emanated from that experience. For years and years later, whenever we would run into each other, it was special. We had a special bond. It was not just, oh, you know, made a nice movie, how are you? It was much stronger. Everybody was meant to feel a part of something. And therefore there was more than just acting colleagues. There was always this kind of like family feeling. And I don't think that that exists anymore.
I think people feel the same today as they've always felt. And I think it'll be just as successful as it always was, because you lived through the arguments between them, hoping for them to get together again, wondering how in God's name they're going to do it. And then when you see that look in Duke's eye, when he lifted his eyebrows and looked, you thought, uh-oh, here it comes, here it comes. And they've waited all the time in the theater for that to happen. Where could you find anything better than John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara?
John Wayne helped to invent the modern fight scene in his B-westerns of the 1930s, along with stuntman Yakima Canutt. But there was never a brawl quite like the one in McLintock. Let's take a closer look with some people who know a bit about movie fights and stunt work.
I happened to be fortunate enough to be at Warner Bros. For about 17 years during those times of Sunset Strip and Maverick and Lawman and Bronco and all this stuff. What was done more every day than anything else was the basic fight.
Stunt fight is to movies what sleight of hand is to magic. It's your basic bread and butter. You have to know how to throw, how to take a punch. It's very, very basic.
We've got this big brawl going, and everybody's just doing everything. We'll just wing it. No, no.
When Wayne throws one guy and he flies through the air, hits and starts sliding on his back, they knew what they're doing. That wasn't just somebody he grabbed.
When you have a big scene like that with lots of people fighting, every scene has your principles, right? Your two people, like when he says, I'm not going to hit him, and he hits him. In the background, everybody knows, like Tom and I might be in the background. So we work out a little piece of business. Those two guys will work out business. Those two guys will work out business. And every time they go to different angles, you are supposed to do the same thing, which so that everything matches.
Oh, that's right. Thanks.
It's much more than knowing how to throw and take a punch. You have to be on top of your game. When the director says we're moving here, we have to know where to move, where the camera angles are. If we're throwing a punch and they move, we might have to cheat a little one way or the other to make sure there's no miss, because we're not actually hitting each other.
Yak brought into the business, along with Bill Whitney, the angles, which made the punches look so real. Prior to that, it was hitting the shoulders, and some of the punches and some of the fights looked so bad. They brought in a whole new approach to how fights were done and how people would take the punches and stuff of that nature.
When you're doing the different angles, if I'm going to hit Wayne and you're the cameraman, I'm going to punch him across here. Now you bring the camera over the other way. I'm not going to be able to do this without a miss because you're looking from over there. So instead of that, I'll throw it over here.
Right.
Everybody used to say, let me see the John Wayne punch, the big John Wayne punch. Boy, you got to wait for the big fight. You know it was coming. He had this great big roundhouse that it just looked like it tore your head off. He exaggerated that on the film. You're only as good as the individual you're fighting. And that being that no matter how good a punch I threw, if the person or people that I was throwing the punch at didn't react or take the punch well, the punch really meant nothing.
In learning about how to do a fight, we learn mainly the person who leads the fight is the person who takes a punch. So Royden's completely right. You can throw a gorgeous punch, and if the guy doesn't react, doesn't take it good, it ain't gonna look good. And one thing I gotta say, of all the guys I've seen and worked with, Royden is probably one of the best fight. He throws one of the prettiest punches I've seen.
I started a fight with John Wayne, and I think one of the highlights of my life is that when we did this fight, he said, you know, kid, you throw a hell of a punch.
Get over it.
Did you let me drive? You promised me you would sometime.
No, yeah.
Boss, you better watch that turn on the road. You're gonna kill both of us.
Stuntmen are very special. They really are. They risk their lives every day doing stunts, and they're enjoying doing them. I've never known a stuntman I disliked, and that I wasn't proud to know. Duke would use the stuntmen to place scenes in a movie.
Chuck Roberson was John Wayne's double, and will always be known as such.
I know of Chuck Roberson. He did all of Wayne's movies. I came in a little bit late. I never worked with him, but he's famous. I mean, he's legendary.
Your presence there, like a Hayward or a Roberson or a Cliff Lyons, all these guys, Yakima, Connaught, these people that were there, when they set up a sequence, they set it up with the actor in mind. And when it got to the point that, yes, you could really get yourself hurt, then that's when we basically stepped in. When you set something up or a part of something, you do it with your good friend in mind. I think when Roberson or Hayward or whoever was doubling Wayne at the same time, when they stepped on a horse, they kind of did it with Wayne in mind.
I think that I've had probably more fun doing the basics, fights and falls and things like that, where you actually have the chance to be kind of creative.
What's the stuntman's credo? Dialogue hell, let's wreck something. Perfect example, Birnbaum store, when John Wayne was walking through there chasing Maureen O'Hara. Let's look at the room. Okay, we got that, we got this, we got that. Pretty much nothing's going to be left standing when we're done. He just said, let's trash it. And that's the most fun.
In movies, when people use bottles and plate glass windows and things like that, it's not glass, it's boiled sugar.
They used to use what was candy glass in the old days, and now they use a polystyrene, a different kind of material that's easy, breaks easier.
Even the sugar glass, you get these little splinters, and they wouldn't hurt you so much as they might get in an eye, or if you're doing a bottle thing. We used to do a show, and I'd hit Tom regularly in the head with the bottle, and I would be so into it, I'd crush the neck of it in my hand and throw it. Then I would look at my hand and have these little tiny pieces of plastic stuck in my hand.
When Duke realizes she's around the door and is coming in after her, and I jump up onto the table and run to the window. I did all of that up to the window. The actual crash through the window was done by Dean Smith. And he had to wear my bloomers and my petticoat, and boy, the guys really teased him. He still is teased about it to this day. And he was an Olympic runner and was the only person they could find that was slim enough to double me.
Now, you got to keep in mind that a lot of the actors from yesterday were athletes themselves. A lot of those people could do a lot of things and do it well.
And they called me their little stunt girl. I was very proud of it. And they took such extraordinary good care of me. For days before that, they'd come up to me and they'd say, when you go up the ladder, what are you to do? And then half an hour later, another one of the stuntmen would come up to me and say, how are you to climb the ladder? How are you to hold your hands? And why? And I'd have to go through that whole thing until they brainwashed me to the point where I didn't have to think. And they were a little worried about me doing that stunt, but I wasn't smart enough to be worried.
That ladder had been rigged up somewhere. The base of the ladder was obviously cabled down so it would fall a certain way. And
right. It wouldn't, no matter what, it wouldn't change its pivot point. So you anchor the bottom. And then when she fell, you saw it start to fall, and then she fell out. She started to fall. They cut to that wide shot so you could see where she was going to land. Then, of course, up here they cut to her just dropping in. So that was 3 separate cuts for one thing.
I have a wonderful still of me hanging on the ladder as the ladder was being hauled up, and Duke was up at my head, and a wonderful stuntman called Red Morgan had his hand under my rear end, and he said, you damn fool, get down, you're going to kill yourself. And I said, well, it's a little late to be telling me that as they're hauling me up. So they hauled me up. I did the stunt. After I fell in the water trough and I stood up to climb out, I thought Duke is going to say, great, Maureen, wonderful. But instead he said, you didn't get your hair wet. I was ready to sock him in the nose, but I didn't. Afterwards, he told me he was thrilled, but scared to death when I did it.
I think our presence on the set makes the set feel comfortable. They know because you're there, it's going to be safe. Now, can things happen? Certainly they can happen. That's the human element. And if something is really, really wrong, they can kind of foresee that maybe we can change that around just a little bit, still give the director what he wants, because after all, we're there to compliment the director, not to direct. Does that mean that they never get bruised or bumped? Not at all. I've seen Wayne get bruised and bumped, believe me. And in some cases, the actors will do almost 90% of it, you know, because the director would like to really get in and say, hey, that's Wayne.
Who cares?
So many good stunt people came from the Western world. In a lot of cases, they were cowhands, they were ranchers. A lot of times you see these films, you see these bucking horses and all like that. A lot of these guys competed on the weekends. And I was accepted by my peers who were, in a lot of cases, the real cowboy. And I doubled a lot of leading men in the Western world for many, many years.
I think the thing that about John Wayne was he was a hero. He was a hero to all of us. He stood for good things. As professionals in the movie industry, he pioneered the way we do fights, the technique that we use, and the telegraphing and making sure your elbow's up and people can see where it's coming from. He did all that, but for me, he was just a hero. It was the kind of movie I wanted to be in, the kind of movies I'd like to make, and the kind of image that you want to portray.
McLintock was a big, boisterous, rambunctious Western, unlike any Wayne had made before, and audiences ate it up.